Yo guys, what is going on? Got a Cherubimon purple and yellow deck profile for you guys despite what it looks like. This is indeed a purple deck with a yellow base playing yellow eggs as well as a lot of yellow threes. Cherubimon is a really cool deck. Been hyped up a lot recently, especially because it's just been going crazy against the meta. Has a lot of really powerful plays that it can go into. So I'm going to kind of just talk about the deck, what makes it so good, why people are on the hype train, and yeah, maybe show some combos and tech choices and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just talk about the Digi-Eggs to start with. So 4 copies of Upamon, so you are playing a yellow base. The whole reason for this, if you aren't aware, is because your boss monster, Cherubimon, this guy right here says that on deletion, when he dies, basically, for each tamer you have in play, you may play 1 level 3 Digimon from your trash without paying the memory cost. Now, there are 2 things that are crazy about that effect. One, that it does not specify color, and one, that it does not restrict the fact that they don't get on-play effects. So you can bring back stuff like a Pokemon and it still gets its on-play effect to search. So in line with that, you're playing a yellow package because the yellow level 3s are arguably the best in the game. We've seen that in the past with Lord Nightmon, so that is why you're playing the yellow package. And then of course Upamon's good because he lets you draw the card, but we'll talk about that as we get into the yellow level 3s here. So for starters, the best card in the deck is 4 copies of Pokemon. No hybrid deck is complete in my opinion without this guy in some capacity. Of course, he is a +2 on play, and then whenever you Digivolve into one of your Tamers, you get to gain 2 memory, just speeding up your deck that much more. It's just really insane, this format, just being able to get the +2, especially this deck, because it is a little bit less consistent, because you're not able to like evolve directly on your eggs, like your hybrids onto your eggs, because your hybrids are purple but your Digi-Eggs are yellow. So you definitely need the consistency from the Pokemon. So I think in this deck you have to max out on this, because there's not that many ways aside from Pokemon and Analog you to get the combo pieces you need, and that's what this deck is. It's a combo deck. So for the yellow level 3s, we are playing, of course, 3 copies of your Floodgate rookie Cutemon. I think Cutemon is so crazy in so many capacities, being able to restrict your opponent's line of play, being able to prevent them from doing what they want to do by evolving like their Beowulfmon for 1, their Jet Sylphies for 1, etc. This card is just absolutely crazy. And then being able to play this and then your opponent outs it and then you can bring it back with Cherubimon to screw them over like in the later turns is just absolutely crazy. So hence why I'm playing 3 copies of this card. And then the next yellow rookie, which I actually have not seen too many copies of in a lot of other Cherubimon decks, is 3 copies of Starmons. My buddy Dak and I have been theory crafting this deck for a while, and we agreed that Starmons is just absolutely crazy in so many different ways. For one, just the fact that you have a removal card that on play minuses 1,000 for each Digimon you have in play. If you've got, like, let's say you promoted a Cutemon or something, you can just simply play a Starmon and then that outs your opponent's Pokemons. It outs Gaussmon and Gazimon's Terriers as well. It doesn't get rid of the non-red Floodgate rookies, like the ones that prevent you from reducing. However, if you've got 3 in play, which actually isn't really hard to do, like let's say turn 1 you've established a Pokemon and then you've like Digivolved a hybrid for free, and then that's your 3rd Digimon is the Starmons right there. So there's a lot of ways you can do that, but not only is this card good by itself, but with Cherubimon, guys, I am telling you, this card is absolutely insane. Being able to board wipe your opponent, not only do you get the Soul Charge effect off of Cherubimon, but then you also get to reduce some stuff based on the number of Digimon you have in play. So if you bring back like 3-4 cards off of Cherubimon, you're doing -3-4,000 to your opponent's Digimon in play. And then for the next, we got the recovery package. Next yellow level 3 is 2 copies of Salamon. I kind of want to bump this up to 3. I probably wouldn't play 4, but I don't think either of these are cuttable. If I was to cut a card, I would probably cut one of the Bushi Agumons, which again is just an absolutely crazy extender. One really cool thing you can do, I'll show you guys in the combos, is like bring this back from your trash during your turn and still attack with it because it's got Rush. And then Salamon is just great because of the recovery. You are playing Blinding Ray in this deck, so you can burn yourself out a little bit. But then just having this combined with Upamon, being able to draw 1 and recover 1, is just really good in my opinion. And then for the last yellow level 3s, which isn't one you're evolving, but it is one you are playing regardless, is 2 copies of Lucimon. I think Lucimon in this deck, we've seen this in the past comboed with like Lord Knight and stuff, and it didn't really see too much success. However, in this deck especially, it's really crazy. For one, you can get 10 cards in trash pretty quickly, so even playing this from your hand, recovering 1 is not the worst thing in the world. It can definitely save you from games. And then 2, it also lets you make your Cherubimon that much more impactful. You've got 2 yellow level 3s and then a third one. Like, all these guys have really crazy on play effects, so you really just want to abuse Cherubimon as much as possible. He is also 10,000, so that gets over pretty much every relevant card in the metagame. It can crash with the Seraphimon. It gets over all the level 5s, etc. So Luzamon, I think, is really good. And if you draw multiple cards, the cool thing about a mulligan rule, if you're playing with that, is that we can just get rid of those bottom deck those if need be. Okay, so that is it for the yellow cards. Now for the purple cards, starting off with the hybrids, of course, 4 copies of Loemon. So Loemon is your vanilla hybrid. He's the Lobomon or the Agunimon of the deck, just playing 4 copies on him because you need the hybrid names, basically. So 4 copies of this, and then the really crazy one is 4 copies of Kaiser Leomon. So because these are the only purple hybrids you do have, you need to max out on them, just like how basically every yellow-purple list plays 4 Kaze, 4 Jet Sylphie, and 4 Zephyrmon, I mean. But Kaiser Leo is really crazy because he's got the effect of, if you Digivolve him on top of a hybrid or a Koichi, you get retaliation until the end of your opponent's next turn. So that is just an absolutely insane effect. It makes this card so much more impactful. Basically, for a 2 cost or free, if you got a Pokemon, you can out like an Ancient Beetlemon, you can out any of your opponent's suspended Digimon, Seraphimon, Tynus, etc. Not to mention, when you pair this with Koichi, you get to gain the memory off the inherited deletion, and then if you pair it with a Rihimon, because the retaliation follows whatever you evolve into, if you like swing into something, crash with the Rihimon will not only kill the Digimon, but then it'll get its on deletion effect, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But then, of course, yeah, so this card is just absolutely crazy. I think you definitely have to max out on this. The only downside being that, like, you have to specifically Digivolve on Koichi or a hybrid. So because there's no like purple level 3 hybrids, if you don't have Koichi, you need to like evolve a Loemon and then evolve a Kaiser Leo, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So that's it for level 4s. For the level 5s, we've got 4 copies of Rihimon. Okay, this guy is your bread and butter. Honestly, half the reason this deck is so good, even without Cherubimon, is just looping with Rihimon. So what Rihimon does is, of course, he's got the effect where you can reduce the Digivolve cost to a 1 cost if you got like a Tamer underneath your source. So most of the times you're evolving this for 1, or actually every time, unless your source got stripped or something, but you're evolving this for 1, and then of course on deletion, when he is deleted, you may play 1 purple Tamer from your trash without paying the memory cost. So of course that also does trigger things like Koichi and like Matt to get their on play effect, which is one reason why it's so good. But what you can do is you can loop this card. So for example, if I've got, say, let's say I've got a Matt underneath this, and then I can like Digivolve Matt, Digivolve Kaiser Leo, Digivolve Rihi, I can like attack, like delete this somehow, like maybe if it dies or I delete it by one of my own effects, Rihimon dies, and then in the trash's effect will play back the Matt's effect will then add back the Rihi, so you can kind of loop it that way. And then if you've got Calling from the Darkness, which is another really crazy effect in this deck that you can do, you can like truly loop the Rihimon by like using like deleting these 2 to add back. If you got 2 Rihimons engraved, let's say you've got like this in trash, and then you've got your Calling from the Darkness. What you can do, let me just move these out of here for a second. What you can do, this is your trash. If you've got this stack, you can like delete your own Rihimon, add back the second one and the Kaiser Leo, and then Rihimon's effect will play the Matt Ishida, and then what you can do in Matt is then add back Calling from the Darkness. So then you've got all 3 of these cards again in hand to like do the loop over and over. So the reason why you need 2 Rihimons, I do want to point out, is because the way Calling from the Darkness is worded, you have to delete your Digimon and then return up to 2 cards from your trash to your hand, basically all resolving that effect at once. So like think about it like this: if you like delete this stack, if you move this first Rihimon that you deleted, it won't be in the trash to be able to trigger a non-deletion effect. It's just like how if you remove a Digimon from field, it misses the trigger, so you basically like can't trigger it if it's not on field. So it's the same thing with on-deletion effects. They need to be in the trash when you trigger them to resolve. So because this isn't in the trash anymore, you couldn't do it. So that's why you need a second Rihimon to be able to like loop with Calling from the Darkness. But anyways, guys, that's one of the reasons why that card is so good. And then the secondary ultimate me here is 2 copies of Neo Devimon. This card can realistically be a couple of things. I think this is the most impactful for the meta. This card says, during your opponent's turn, whenever you play a Tamer, gain 3 memory. So it makes Kari or like a 6 cost, it makes TK a 7 cost, it makes JP a 6. So this card, unless they have a Gazimon or a memory blocker, is just absolutely crazy. Alternatively, you could play either Rebellimon or Antilamon. I think I would probably go with Rebellimon just because this is crazy against the green and red hybrid matchups. But Antilamon is a really cool card as well. This says 1 Digivolve and you may play a purple Tamer where they cost 3 or less from your trash. So you do have a pretty decent amount meeting that restriction. If you are playing with side deck rules, you could possibly like main this and side either or both of these. This is really a flex spot in the deck. So I did just want to bring up some other alternative solutions. And then for the level 6s, of course, playing 3 copies of Cherubimon. That's it. I do think 4 is good, but it can get a little bit bricky at times, especially because you don't want to really see this guy early game. He's not like a Dynasmon or a Serafi that has like a really, really good effect early game because you need to have Tamers to set him up. What he says is 1 Digivolving, you play a purple Tamer from your trash, and then for each one of your Tamers, you get to then delete a level 4 lower Digimon. So it becomes a pseudo board wipe when you Digivolve him, which is really crazy. And then, of course, when you delete him via your own effects or one of your opponent's effects or by battle or something, you then get to bring back X amount of level 3s from your trash, X being the number of Tamers you have in play. So this is really crazy, especially with all the Tamers. You are playing a very high Tamer count in this deck. So with some of the combos you can do, like I said, I mentioned that you can like loop with Matt and stuff. But like, let's say if you got an Analog Youth as well, like if you got like, let's say, this is a stack or something, you can like Cherubimon, Digivolve, play like a Tamer from trash, blow up 3 cards, and then if you've got like Calling from the Darkness, again, which is why this card is so good, you can like play Calling from the Darkness, delete this, add back like the 2 materials that you just used, and then Analog Use effects will trigger, gain a memory, pop an egg, and then Cherubimon will trigger, bring back a bunch of Digimon. And the same thing applies with Cherubimon with Calling from the Darkness. If you got 2 in there, you can then loop it, like add back the second one, and then Digivolve it again to board wipe your opponent. But there's just a lot of really cool interactions like that. And then Analog Youth just especially makes the deck even more crazy. Speaking of which, playing 3 copies of Analog Youth. This card is just absolutely insane. So of course the consistency is important, but then being able to gain a memory and hatch an egg every single time you blow up one of your level 5 or higher Digimon works not only with Cherubimon, but of course Rihimon as well, making this even more crazy, especially if you've got Rihimon with Koichi underneath it. If this dies, you're gaining 1 off this, 1 off this. So there's just a lot of really crazy interactions you can do with Analog Youth. And then of course if you got multiples, it's really nice as well. So this is important for doing your combos. And then for the other Tamers, playing of course 4 copies of Koichi Kimura, being able to just discard 1, draw 1 is pretty decent. You honestly don't really have that many good discard fodders in this deck. It's mainly like your yellow Digimon that you would discard, and then of course your other Tamers, because you can bring them back off Cherubimon. If you've got like multiple of these in hand, you can like ditch 1, bring it back later, or if you've got multiple mats or something, you can always bring it back off Cherubimon. This is important, of course, just because you needed to fulfill the Kaiser Leomon, and then of course the Inherited On Deletion is a really, really crazy effect, guys. Being able to just like crash into stuff and then or just like making your option card, your 1-cost option cards free to play is really, really crazy. And then for the other Tamers, playing 3 copies of Matt. There is another copy somewhere in here. There we go. So 3 copies of Matt Ishida. So 3 I think is important. I was originally testing out 2, and I think you can definitely get away with 2 just because of how quickly this deck goes through. You know, this deck gets through its combo pieces. But having 3 is important, especially early game. A lot of other purple decks, you don't want to play Matt early game, but this deck, it's honestly fine being able to play this. If you got like a Bokomon, then you can like Digivolve into Rihi, and then if Rihi dies, you can replay the Matt and then add back the Rihi. So Matt is actually really, really crazy in this deck. And then of course, like I said, any excess cards you can just ditch off of the like Koichi effect or something like, or like even if you trash them via Analog Youth, you can always get them back from the Cherubimon effect, which is why this deck is so nice. And then for the other purple Tamers, just playing 2 copies of purple Mimi. Now this could either be Mimi or 2 copies of Kari. I definitely think both are good. I believe it was the top 16 purple list that played in Arlington was maining Karis and siding Mimis, which I can definitely see that working. That's a really, really cool strategy. Mimi, I think, is good not only for your option cards being able to gain a memory off of that, and then of course if you like delete a Koichi, that's like a +1 memory, but also essentially making Hammer Sparks, like nulling Hammer Sparks and making your opponent pay 1 extra for like their Thunder Laser or like whatever other option cards they're playing. Basically every deck is playing like low cost option cards, Atomic Inferno, etc. You can often catch them by surprise, so this card is really, really good. Remember that it does say during all turns, especially the low play cost does matter as well if you're bricking on Tamers. Like if you don't see any of your others, this is nice to see early game to Digivolve your hybrids onto. But that is it for the Tamer count. And then for the option cards, just playing 2 copies of Deathclaw, 1 Calling from the Darkness, and 2 copies of Blinding Ray. So Deathclaw, I think, is really important to out the Floodgate rookies that are just roaming around in the meta. Of course, being able to not being able to reduce and not being able to gain memory off of Boko and stuff really does hurt the deck. So you definitely need to play this in some capacity. I was originally playing 2 Calling from the Darkness, but because you can like loop it with Matt, I don't even think this card is necessary, but it is very, very good. Don't get me wrong at all. I still like this card a lot, and going to 2, I would probably, if you want to play 2 of this, I would like cut a Deathclaw, but like I said, Deathclaw is really, really good as well. There's just too many broken option cards to play. And then speaking of broken option cards, Blinding Ray is really crazy. Of course, being able to just finish your opponent for game, just gaining 2 memory out of nowhere is really insane, especially if they try to memory choke you and you know you've Deathclawed like their Gazimon before. That's why I think these 2 cards in like tandem with each other is really important. Being able to, like, if your opponent's preventing you from gaining off of the Blinding Ray, you can Deathclaw their Floodgates and go about your play. So these cards all really, really crazy, and definitely taking advantage of the fact that you're playing a yellow base. Yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this deck profile. Let me know what you think down in the comments of Cherubimon. Personally, I think this is a very fun and extremely competitive deck for the BT7 meta. Oh, one other card I did want to mention, of course, is I like to call this card White Schwartz. This card is, of course, really, really crazy, but I don't think it's necessary in this deck just because this is a very combo-focused deck, and you're not playing yellow-purple, so you don't get the chance to recover a ton and control the board. But I definitely think it is a good card. Not to knock this card at all. It's a board wipe in a lot of senses, but you're also playing Cherubimon, so there's that to consider. But definitely another tech you could include. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.